Next game to focus on is Liverpool against Aston Villa, which is an 8 o'clock kickoff at Anfield. This will be a daunting fixture for Aston Villa, given just how strong Liverpool have looked in recent weeks. They made full use of both Arsenal and Man City dropping points on the weekend by securing a comeback against Brighton to put them 2 points clear at the top of the table. And it's been completely deserved. I think since that loss to Nottingham Forest at Anfield, Arne Slot has overseen 11 wins and 1 draw from his 12 games. The one draw being against Arsenal at the Emirates, so sort of one that you can sort of write off. They're in top form coming into this one. They're top of the league, top of the Champions League, and we saw an interesting change in that game against Leverkusen as Luis Diaz plays as a centre forward. I will touch on that a bit more later on. But for Aston Villa, they had a midweek Champions League game to contend with, and they were away in Belgium, which they lost 1-0. They also lost 4-1 to Spurs last time out in the league, so they're sort of coming into this game in a bit of a poor run of form, which does not bode well for them at all. On the injury report, Jota remains out, so we'll likely see Núñez lead the line, I would imagine. Arne Slot sort of mentioned how he played Luis Diaz up front to sort of throw Jonathan Tah off his game. However, I would imagine Núñez comes back in. He started the last 2 league games in the absence of Jota, so I think that just makes more sense. And against the sort of high line of Aston Villa, I think Núñez sort of has the ability to really take advantage of that. For Aston Villa, we saw Morgan Rogers subbed against Spurs on the weekend, but he did return midweek in Belgium, so you'd imagine he gets a start and plays something close to full 90 if he doesn't get injured again. The first angle for me is for Darwin Núñez to register 2 or more fouls, which is priced at 2.5 with Sky. It's landed in 5 out of 7 this season when he's played 60 minutes or more, and I do expect him to start. I think even though Luis Diaz obviously bagged a hat-trick, Gakpo's been in great form, and Salah is undroppable, I do think Núñez gets a start. Just because he has a sort of skill set to really take advantage of this matchup against Aston Villa. I think when talking about Núñez, you have to sort of consider that he's not the same player as he was last season under Klopp. He's a lot more disciplined, and he deserves a lot more. He deserves a lot of credit for that, I would say. He's a lot more sort of measured and controlled in his play, not as erratic as he was under Klopp. And because of that, I think last season I'd probably be looking at the sort of Núñez offside, Núñez shots on target kind of angles, but he just hasn't been as good for targeting those sort of markets this season. So fouls are where to go. He's averaging 2.12 fouls per 90, and he draws a good matchup against Ezri Konsa, who's expected to start at centre-back. I think those two should find a lot of duels together. Konsa obviously has a tendency to go down quite easily under contact, so could see some quite soft fouls conceded by Núñez, which would be ideal. Sticking with duels, I also really like Morgan Rogers to draw a foul. Obviously, I mentioned this one last week as well. But in games like this, where his sort of dribbling ability will be relied upon to carry Aston Villa forward from their sort of defensive half, Morgan Rogers is the one player that sort of stands out as the person to do that. I think he's the only person in that team that can really carry the ball strongly. And if you look into his fouls drawn data against sort of similar teams in similar matchups, he's drawn 2 fouls against Spurs, and that was despite obviously going off injured in the 70th minute. He drew 2 fouls against Man United, and he drew 2 fouls against Bayern Munich. So he has good potential in those last 2 games as well against Man United and Bayern Munich. He played the full 90 in those, so he is an important player for Villa in these kind of games. And yeah, again, barring any sort of mitigating circumstances, would imagine he plays the entire game against Liverpool, especially if the game remains close. He also drew 1 foul against Arsenal at home earlier in the season. You can actually pair that with Szoboszlai to commit a foul, which has landed in 11 out of 12 games 11 out of 12 starts this season for Liverpool, and that comes out at 1.75 with Sky. Obviously, a bit on the shorter side, but you get two correlated stats that have fantastic hit rates for the season, and it's close enough to evens. I think you could definitely ladder the two as well, potentially going two Szoboszlai fouls, two Rodgers fouls drawn. The only sort of worry I would have with that is Szoboszlai doesn't have a sort of safe minutes floor, or it's not as safe as, say, a McAllister or a Gravenberch. So I'd probably be leaning more towards Morgan Rodgers to draw two or more fouls, which is actually priced at 2.88 with Sky, which again, based on sort of relevant games that I've mentioned, looks a pretty big price again. The next person that I want to sort of focus on a bit more for this game is Onana in midfield for Aston Villa. Against Spurs, his performance really stood out to me. His sort of physicality in midfield was absolutely essential. He was all over the pitch, even though Spurs obviously won that game 4-1. I think it would have been a lot worse without Onana. He really helped out his defence. He was extremely willing to duel in midfield. And looking into his stats, he made 5 fouls in that game. He made 3 tackles and was dribbled past twice. So in his 90 minutes, he contested a lot of duels, really put himself about, and I think it'll be a similar game against Liverpool, in the sense that he'll have a lot of defensive work to do. He'll draw matchups against very good players for drawing fouls on the side of Liverpool, and for him to make tackles as well. So his physicality is really essential in this game. Again, his minutes haven't been particularly safe under Emery so far, but I think just based on how important he will be, we could see him play another 90 minutes. He was rested midweek in Belgium, which I think is a good sign. Tielemans obviously played the full 90 in that game, so would imagine Onana starts here at least, and we're sort of hoping for an 80 minutes floor. And I think 80 minutes against a side like Liverpool at Anfield, you're really targeting him to sort of make or get in a lot of duels. So the price that stands out for me is Onana to make 2 or more fouls, which is 1.83 with Paddy. Obviously a bit on the shorter side, would rather get that odds against, so could be forced to be a bit creative with sort of pairing that with a correlated stat. For example, Gravenberch should draw a foul, McAllister's draw a foul, just something along those lines. But I do like that as an initial sort of angle. For this game, I will be dedicating some time this weekend to writing an extended thread, sort of finalising all the angles. I appreciate I've been a bit vague, but all of that will be finalised over on Twitter, which I'll hopefully be posting tomorrow. So make sure you are following me there already if you're not already. Next game, moving on to Sunday, is Nottingham Forest against Newcastle, 2 p.m. kickoff at the City Ground. Nottingham Forest are currently flying. They're third, just behind Liverpool and Man City, led by the goal-scoring exploits of Chris Wood. They've won each of their last 3 games, most recently beating West Ham 3-0 with a clinical display. For Newcastle, they had no midweek game, so they've had a week to prepare.